All right. Hello, everybody. So, my name is Larry Stewart Zaborski. Today is January 31st, 2022. And this is my Philosophy 1010 Week 11 Digestive System Portfolio Submission. So, we're just going to do a deep dive into the digestive system. Let's start off. Most important thing, not most important, but we have to jump into from a base, and we need to understand the anatomy first and foremost. So, first and foremost, the digestive system has the GI tract. So, what does the GI tract entail? It has the esophagus. Well, going down, it starts from the mouth, then it goes down into the esophagus. You have your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, your gut. So the gut is kind of a portion of your GI tract. Is the portion of the GI tract from the stomach to the anus. Very important. So in your digestive system, they produce something called chyme. Chyme is a soupy mixture, of food and secretions. Has its purpose. It's very important in the digestive system. It's very important to know your digestive system is like a tube. One of the tubes is your salivary glands, the one that I'm trying to catch right now. Your salivary glands, you actually have three of them. You have your sublingual glands, just like it sounds like, it's under the tongue. You have your submandibular glands, which is under the mandible. And then you have your parotid glands, which are it's by the hinge of the jaw. So also the esophagus is also hollow. It's a narrow tube that travels from the thorax to the abdomen. You have your stomach. Your stomach is it's basically a bag. If you want to think of it, it's very simple. Just think of it that way. It could hold of about 2 liters on average of food and various other fluids. Part of the stomach, you have your fundus, you have your central body, and you have your antrum. The stomach mixes food with acid and enzymes to create chyme. You have another hollow organ, which is your small intestine. Part of the small intestine, you have your pylorus. The pylorus is the gatekeeper to opening between the stomach and the small intestine. Think of it like a pyloric valve. You have your sections of those sections of the small intestine. You have your duodenum, your jejunum, and your ileum. And within that, you have your glandular organs, you have your pancreas, and your liver. Going further, go back into the large intestine. Large intestine goes into the anus, and that's the end of the digestive system. It goes into excretion. And you also have your colon. That is the proximal section of the large intestine. It's where the watery chyme that's built up in your digestive system travels, and it becomes a semi-solid feces, which then goes out into the rectum and out the anus. So in the GI tract, it's good to know that there's 4 layers. First layer being the mucosa, and we're going from inner out. So the mucosa is the inner lining of the GI tract. There's even sections within the mucosa. You have your mucosal epithelium, it faces the lumen. You have your lamina propria, which is a subepithelial connective tissue that holds the epithelium in place. And then you have your muscularis mucosae, which is a thin layer of smooth muscle that separates the lamina propria from the lamina mucosa. Next up, you have your submucosa, which is another layer of the GI tract. This is the middle layer of the gut wall. It's composed of connective tissue with larger blood and lymph vessels. And always good to know, you have your submucosal plexus within the submucosa. The next one is the muscularis externa, which is kind of what it sounds like, the externa. It is the outer wall of the GI tract. It consists of 2 layers of smooth muscle, an inner circular layer, and an outer longitudinal layer. And in here you have your myenteric plexus. And the last layer of the GI tract is your serosa, which is the outer covering of the entire GI tract, and it's a continuation of the peritoneal membrane. now we're going to go into the functions and the processes of your digestive system. So the number one primary function of your digestive system is to move nutrients, water, and electrolytes from the external environment into your body's internal environment. Now, there's four main processes. You have your digestion, that is the breakdown of food. You have your absorption, which is the movement of substances from the lumen of the GI tract to the extracellular fluid. Next one is your secretion. Now, secretion could also mean one of two things. One, it could be the movement of water and ions from your ECF, or your extracellular fluid, to the digestive tract lumen. Or the second meaning, it could be the release of substances synthesized by GI cells into the lumen or the ECF. And the last one being your motility. Now, the motility is the movement of material in the GI tract as a result of muscle contraction. Swallowing. Another thing is motility. A lot of people think it's just gravity. It's actually the muscles using motility to kind of push the food down. So within one of the functions, they produce a lot of mucus. Mucus is a viscous secretion of glycoproteins called mucins, and its function is to form a protective coating around the GI mucosa and lubricate the contents of the gut, which is also very important. It's made in mucus cells in the stomach and salivary glands, and made in goblet cells in the intestine. A few challenges of the digestive system is it always has to avoid autodigestion, mass balance, and defense. So the next thing they kind of go into is motility. From motility, it's where the GI tract, it has a lot of smooth muscle that kind of contracts spontaneously. There's different types of contractions. There's tonic contractions, which is done by chemical processes, and then there's phasic contractions, which could also go into kind of slow wave potentials, and that follows into, there's depolarization and repolarization of smooth muscle contractions and relaxation as a result of it, and these originate in the interstitial cells of the cagule. So these GI smooth muscles exhibit a lot of different patterns of contraction, which motility kind of regulates. And going to the next part is the regulation of the GI function. So your enteric system, your ENS, can basically act on its own, but it still has a lot of similarities to the CNS, or the central nervous system. A few examples of it is they both contain intrinsic neurons, neurotransmitters or neuromodulators, glial support cells, the fusion barrier, and an integrating center. And a lot of that comes with the regulation of GI function comes with a lot of the GI hormones and neuropeptides. And there's a couple of families within the hormones and neuropeptides. You have the gastrin family, which is in the stomach, and then you have your secretin family, which is in the intestines. So we're going to go into one of the first phases of the digestive system, which is the cephalic phase. So the cephalic phase, digestion starts in the mouth, and the purpose of it is to soften and moisten food, digestion of starch. You have the purpose of taste and also defense from anything that could be possibly going down into your mouth. Saliva is produced within the glands, and the swallowing moves the food from the mouth to the stomach. In doing so, your epiglottis, which is in the back of your throat, closes, so it protects, so it allows the food to travel down to where it's supposed to go and protect it from going down the esophagus into your airways. So the next thing is your gastric phase. So the gastric phase is where it hits the stomach. So now the stomach functions, has three major functions: storage, digestion, and defense. Defense is a big thing. So within the gastric phase, you have something called the vagal reflex, which is a long reflex from the cephalic phase that starts the digestive activity in the stomach before the food arrives. And then you have your gastric phase, which once the food enters the stomach, stimuli in the gastric lumen initiate a series of short reflexes that kind of make up the gastric phase. Then that causes some gastric secretions, and that protects and digests the food or anything else that's going into your body. The next phase is your intestinal phase. So your intestinal phase is where it starts in the small intestine, and their function is to the intestinal secretions promote the digestion. They secrete digestive enzymes. Bile is then made in the liver and then released in the gallbladder, which aids and kind of pushes forward the digestive process. Your small intestine also secretes bicarbonates, and mucus is also made from the intestinal goblet cells. So further along, you also have your pancreas. Pancreas is the one that secretes the enzymes and the bicarbonate. Your liver secretes the bile. And just a fun, not a fun fact, but a fact is most of your digestion happens in the small intestine. So once that happens, the bile. So there's different materials that are absorbed and digested in different ways. First one being fat. So bile salts are what facilitate the fat digestion. So this is carried out by lipases and colipases. Fat absorption occurs mainly by simple diffusion, and cholesterol is actively transported. And then in order for fat to be digested, it requires colipases. Once fat absorption happens, it requires something called chylomicrons, and these are triglycerides that join with cholesterol and proteins to form what is called chylomicrons. Next is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are absorbed as monosaccharides. So they're broken down by an enzyme called amylase. Cellulose is not digestible. And glucose is broken into disaccharides and then monosaccharides in order to be digested. Next thing is your proteins. Your proteins are digested, broken down into small peptides and amino acids. And there's actually two types of enzymes that cause this protein digestion. And they are endopeptidases and exopeptidases. They each have their own function and purpose as to when they are each used. And the last one is your nucleic acids. They are actually digested into bases and monosaccharides, and they are digested by pancreatic and intestinal enzymes. Excuse me. Once they're created into that, then they're pushed forward and broken down into nitrogenous bases and monosaccharides. So the intestine absorbs all the vitamins and the minerals such as iron, calcium, and also the intestine absorbs all the ions in the water. The mineral absorption occurs via active transport. So one of the once all of those digestion and absorption is happened, there are some functions for immunity of the GI tract. So there's a few protective mechanisms that the GI tract implements at all times. So the acid in the mucus production is not only to aid digestion, it's also as a form of defense. Vomiting also, when your body doesn't accept something or something doesn't go right, vomiting is also a form of defense, and so is diarrhea. So another one thing you should know about the immune functions is something called M cells. And M cells sample the gut contents and present antigens to cells of the GALT. I hope you guys enjoyed. That's really it on the digestive system. Again, hope you guys enjoyed, and that is the digestive system.